Captain Amara Johnson stood frozen as security escorted her from her own aircraft. "Wait outside, ma'am," they insisted despite her captain's uniform. 20 minutes later, she returned, not as the humiliated pilot they expected, but as the airline's newly appointed chief operations officer with termination papers in hand. Before I dive into this shocking story of discrimination and sweet justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed workplace injustice, and subscribe to hear more incredible true stories of resilience against racism. Now let's find out how Captain Johnson went from being kicked off her own plane to firing everyone responsible. Amara Johnson had always been destined for the skies. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Detroit, she would watch planes cutting through clouds, dreaming of the day she'd be at the controls. Unlike most childhood dreams, Amara's never faded. Through scholarships and sheer determination, she graduated at the top of her class in aeronautical engineering before joining the Air Force. Her military career was nothing short of stellar. 3 tours of duty, multiple commendations for exceptional flying in hazardous conditions, and a reputation for remaining ice-cold under pressure. When Major Johnson decided to transition to commercial aviation, her credentials were impeccable. Yet somehow, she faced rejection after rejection from major airlines until Skyline took a chance on her. "Your technical skills are impressive," the hiring manager had said, "but we're concerned about your ability to handle the customer service aspects of commercial flying." The implication hung in the air between them. Translation: they worried passengers wouldn't trust a black woman pilot. Despite this initial hesitation, Amara's exceptional performance quickly silenced doubters. Within 4 years, she advanced from first officer to captain, a promotion timeline almost unheard of in the industry. She became one of only 3 black female captains among Skyline's roster of over 500 pilots. First Officer Jason Reynolds had been paired with Amara for the past 8 months. Though he respected her skills in the cockpit, his comments occasionally betrayed subtle biases. "You really fly like one of the guys," he once remarked, intending it as a compliment. Amara had smiled tightly. "I fly like a pilot with 15 years of experience, Jason." But the real thorn in Amara's side was regional manager Thomas Blackwell. A former pilot himself who'd been grounded for medical reasons, Blackwell oversaw operations for Skyline's Eastern Division. His thinly veiled contempt for Amara was apparent from their first meeting. "Quite the meteoric rise through the ranks," he'd said during her captain's orientation. "Must be nice having those diversity initiatives paving your way." That morning, Amara arrived at Reagan National Airport 2 hours before her scheduled departure to London. This flight was crucial, her first transatlantic route and a proving ground for her potential assignment to the elite international team. As she went through security, she noticed the whispers and sideways glances that had become all too familiar. The pre-flight inspection revealed unusual maintenance delays. The fuel line check that normally took 20 minutes had stretched to over an hour. Mechanical issues that had never been flagged on previous flights suddenly required additional documentation. "Is there a problem?" Amara asked the maintenance supervisor. "Just being thorough, Captain," he replied without meeting her eyes. "Mr. Blackwell's orders." The pre-flight briefing was equally tense. Blackwell himself made an appearance, unusual for a routine departure. "Captain Johnson," he said, emphasizing her title with a subtle mockery, "I hope you've thoroughly reviewed the North Atlantic weather patterns. London's been experiencing unusual turbulence corridors. Wouldn't want any incidents on your first transatlantic." "I've studied the patterns extensively," Amara replied professionally. "And I've flown through worse turbulence over Baghdad with surface-to-air missiles as an added bonus." Blackwell's smile tightened. "Commercial passengers aren't quite as hardy as military equipment, Captain. Just remember that." As Amara finally boarded her aircraft, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The ground crew averted their eyes when she greeted them, unusual for the typically friendly staff. Flight attendant Zoe Parker seemed nervous, constantly checking her phone. "Everything all right, Zoe?" Amara asked. "Yes, Captain, Zoe replied too quickly. Just, received some last-minute instructions. From whom? Before Zoe could answer, Jason rushed into the cockpit, looking flustered. Amara, there's... He was interrupted by a sharp knock. Two airport security officers stood at the cockpit door, their expressions grim. Captain Johnson, one asked, hand resting near his holster. We need you to come with us immediately. Amara felt her stomach drop as she recognized the familiar scenario unfolding, one she'd experienced too many times before. But this time, she was literally in the captain's seat of an aircraft she was certified to fly. Surely here, her authority would be respected. She was wrong. There's been a report about an unauthorized individual in the cockpit, the taller security officer stated flatly, his badge reading Wilson. His partner, a stocky man with Ramirez on his badge, nodded in agreement. Amara remained calm. That's impossible. I'm Captain Amara Johnson, the pilot assigned to this flight. She reached for her credentials hanging around her neck, displaying her pilot's license, Skyline ID, and captain's certification. As you can see, I'm fully authorized to be here. Officer Wilson barely glanced at her ID. Ma'am, we need to verify this information. Please step outside while we sort this out. Outside? This is my aircraft. I'm the captain, Amara emphasized, her professionalism unwavering despite the growing knot in her stomach. Ma'am, don't make this difficult, Officer Ramirez interjected. We have protocols to follow. Through the cockpit window, Amara could see passengers boarding, some slowing down to stare at the unfolding scene. A few had phones raised, likely recording. Jason, she turned to her first officer, please explain to these officers that I'm the assigned captain for this flight. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He glanced nervously between Amara and the security officers. Maybe it's best to just clear things up quickly, Amara. Procedure and all that. His betrayal stung worse than the security officer's disrespect. After 8 months of flying together, countless conversations about their families, sharing meals during layovers, he wouldn't stand up for her. We're going to be delayed if this isn't resolved immediately, Amara stated firmly. I need to speak with your supervisor. Step outside first, then we can discuss supervisors, Officer Wilson insisted, his hand now firmly on his holster. Zoe Parker, the head flight attendant, appeared behind the officers, her eyes wide with concern. Discreetly, she held her phone at waist level, its camera lens clearly directed toward the confrontation. Amara felt the familiar battle raging inside her, stand firm and risk being labeled aggressive, or comply and sacrifice her dignity. Every black woman in America knew this impossible choice. I'll step into the galley to discuss this, Amara compromised, but I'm not leaving my aircraft without proper cause. This is proper cause, Ramirez replied, his tone hardening. Now, you can walk out with us cooperatively, or we can escort you out. Your choice. The implicit threat hung in the air. Amara had seen enough viral videos to know how quickly these situations escalated when black people resisted, even when that resistance was merely asserting their rights. As she gathered her composure to respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. What seems to be the problem here? Thomas Blackwell appeared behind the officers, his expression a masterclass in false concern. Mr. Blackwell, Amara acknowledged, there seems to be confusion about my authorization to captain this flight. Blackwell's eyes widened in theatrical surprise. Officers, is there an issue with Captain Johnson? We received a report about an unauthorized person in the cockpit, Wilson explained. Just following protocol, sir. I see. Blackwell nodded gravely. Well, protocols must be followed. Perhaps Captain Johnson could wait outside while we verify her credentials. I can personally ensure this is resolved quickly. The betrayal was complete. Blackwell had orchestrated this entire humiliation. This is completely inappropriate, Amara stated, her voice steady despite the rage and hurt building inside her. "I've shown my credentials. I'm on the flight manifest. There is no legitimate reason." "Ma'am," Officer Wilson interrupted, "you need to come with us now." Ramirez moved closer, his body language threatening. "Don't make this a scene." Too late. It already was a scene. Passengers had stopped boarding to watch. Flight attendants stood frozen in the aisles. And still, nobody spoke up for her. With as much dignity as she could muster, Amara stood. "Under protest, I will comply. But I want everyone's names and badge numbers, and this will be reported." As she was escorted through the cabin, the whispers and stares followed her like a toxic cloud. "Is she being arrested? What did the pilot do? I don't feel safe if they're arresting our pilot." The humiliation burned through her as she walked past rows of gawking passengers. At the aircraft door, the final indignity awaited. It had started raining, and neither officer offered to wait for an umbrella or escort vehicle. "Wait outside, ma'am," Officer Wilson instructed, pointing to a spot on the wet tarmac away from the covered jetway. "Someone will come verify your status shortly." And there she stood, Captain Amara Johnson, decorated Air Force veteran and commercial airline captain, in her crisp uniform with 4 gold stripes on each sleeve, forced to wait in the rain like a trespasser at her own aircraft. Through the terminal windows, she could see Thomas Blackwell watching, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He made no move to expedite the verification process. What Blackwell didn't notice, however, was another observer, a stylishly dressed woman watching the scene unfold with narrowed eyes and a phone pressed to her ear. Sophia Reyes, Executive Vice President of Operations at Skyline Airlines, had not planned to be at Reagan National that morning. A last-minute meeting with the airport authority about expanded gate access had brought her there, a coincidence that would change everything. From her vantage point near Gate 27, she had a clear view of the tarmac where Captain Johnson stood in the rain, her posture rigid with dignity despite the humiliation. Sophia knew that posture well. She had adopted it herself countless times throughout her career. 20 years earlier, Sophia had been the only Latina pilot in her flight school. "You'll never make captain," her instructor had told her bluntly. "Passengers won't trust someone who looks like you with their lives." She'd proven him wrong, rising through the ranks before transitioning to executive leadership. Yet even now, as the highest-ranking woman of color at Skyline, she regularly encountered boardroom doors that mysteriously remained closed until her white male colleagues arrived. Without hesitation, Sophia dialed the head of airport security. "This is EVP Reyes. I'm observing one of our captains being detained on the tarmac at Gate 23. I need an explanation immediately." Her tone left no room for evasion. While waiting for a response, she texted Zoe Parker, a flight attendant she'd mentored, "What's happening with your captain?" Zoe's reply came quickly, Regional Manager Blackwell called security on her. Claimed verification issue. "I recorded everything. Send me the video. Now." While waiting, Sophia recalled her conversation with Benjamin Hayes just last week. The 72-year-old CEO and founder of Skyline had been lamenting the sluggish progress in diversifying their pilot ranks. "The numbers don't make sense, Sophia," he had said, reviewing the quarterly report. "We hire diverse candidates, but retention is abysmal. What are we missing?" What they were missing, Sophia had suspected for months, was a systematic effort to drive minorities out, an effort she'd been quietly documenting while building alliances throughout the company. She needed irrefutable evidence before approaching Hayes, knowing the accusations would shake the company to its core. Now, watching Captain Johnson in the rain, Sophia realized she had found her smoking gun. Her phone buzzed with Zoe's video. The footage was damning, showing the security officers dismissing Amara's credentials, Jason's failure to support his captain, and most incriminating, Blackwell's calculated appearance and suggestion that Amara wait outside. When Amara was finally allowed back inside the terminal 30 minutes later, Sophia was waiting. "Captain Johnson. Sofia Reyes, Executive VP of Operations. She extended her hand. I'd like to speak with you privately. Amara, still processing the humiliation, regarded Sofia warily. With all due respect, Ms. Reyes, I need to file a formal complaint about what just occurred. That's exactly what I want to discuss, Sofia replied, leading Amara to a private airline lounge. Once inside, she didn't waste time. What happened to you was unacceptable and appears to be part of a pattern I've been tracking for months. Sofia opened her laptop, revealing a spreadsheet with names, dates, and incidents. Minority pilots reporting mysterious scheduling conflicts. Female captains finding their authority undermined. Safety complaints filed against black pilots at 3 times the rate of their white counterparts. Amara's eyes widened as she recognized several names. Anthony Washington left because of personal reasons last year. After 7 consecutive schedule changes put him on the worst routes possible, Sofia completed. He never knew I tried to intervene. By the time I identified the pattern, he'd resigned. Why are you showing me this? Amara asked cautiously. Because I need an ally who can't be dismissed as having a political agenda. You're the most qualified captain in your cohort, with a military record that's beyond reproach. What happened today wasn't random, Captain Johnson. It was calculated to make you quit. Or lose my temper and give them cause for termination, Amara added quietly. Precisely. But they failed. Sofia leaned forward. I've been gathering evidence for a presentation to Benjamin Hayes. He founded this airline 40 years ago and genuinely believes in meritocracy. He has no idea what's happening in the mid-management ranks. And you think he'll care? Rich old white men aren't exactly known for their commitment to racial justice, Amara said skeptically. Sofia's expression softened. Hayes lost his son in Desert Storm. His life was saved by a black sergeant who died in the process. He established one of the first scholarship programs for minority pilots in the 1990s. Yes, I think he'll care, if we can prove this is systematic and not just isolated incidents. Before Amara could respond, Zoe Parker slipped into the lounge. Ms. Reyes, Captain Johnson, she acknowledged nervously. I wanted you to know that Mr. Blackwell is telling everyone that Captain Johnson had a psychological episode in the cockpit and became belligerent when asked standard security questions. That's completely false. Amara exclaimed. I know. That's why I recorded everything. Zoe handed Sofia a thumb drive. This has the video plus witness statements I collected from 3 flight attendants who saw everything. I also have texts from yesterday where Blackwell asked about Captain Johnson's pre-flight routine. Amara stared at the young flight attendant. Why would you risk your job for me? We barely know each other. Zoe straightened her shoulders. My mother was the first black nurse practitioner at Boston General. I grew up watching her fight battles exactly like this one. I know what's at stake. The lounge door opened again, revealing Benjamin Hayes himself, his silver hair disheveled and his expression grave. Sofia, what the hell is happening? I just got word that a captain was detained on the tarmac. His eyes found Amara. You must be Captain Johnson. I apologize for meeting under these circumstances. Mr. Hayes, Sofia said carefully, I think we need to have that conversation I've been requesting. About the retention problem. Hayes looked between the 3 women, understanding dawning on his weathered face. My office. 1 hour. He turned to Amara. Captain, you have my word this will be addressed. After he left, Amara turned to Sofia. What happens now? Now you have a choice, Sofia replied. You can file your complaint, possibly win a settlement, and move to another airline where the same problems likely exist. Or you can join me in changing Skyline from within. Amara thought about the little girl who'd approached her in uniform last month, eyes wide with possibility. I want to be like you when I grow up, she'd said. I'm not doing this for me, Amara decided. I'm doing it for every black pilot who comes after me. Sophia nodded, understanding completely. Then let's get to work. The official letter arrived 3 days later. Captain Amara Johnson is placed on administrative leave pending investigation of the incident on Flight 1342. This is standard procedure and does not constitute disciplinary action. Amara read it twice, then called Sophia. They're trying to isolate me, she said without preamble. As expected, Sophia replied. Blackwell's playbook is predictable. First, remove you from the environment where you have allies. Second, control the narrative about why you're gone. How do we counter? By conducting our own investigation while they think you're sidelined. Over the next 2 weeks, Sophia used her executive access to review personnel files, pilot evaluations, and complaint records. The pattern emerged clearly: minority pilots, especially women, received more critical evaluations, were assigned to less desirable routes, and faced greater scrutiny for identical situations where white male pilots received no comment. Look at these safety incident reports, Sophia told Amara during one of their clandestine meetings at a coffee shop far from Skyline headquarters. Captain Michael Harrison had 3 landing incidents where he came in too steep. His evaluator noted, minor adjustments needed. Your single incident, which involved compensating for unexpected wind shear, was flagged as, shows concerning judgment under pressure. Same evaluator. Same man. William Foster. Former Navy pilot who's been Blackwell's right hand for years. Amara wasn't the only one working. Zoe Parker had mobilized a quiet network of flight attendants who began documenting discriminatory behavior they witnessed. Their testimonies revealed a culture where questioning the treatment of minority crew members was discouraged through subtle reprimands and scheduled punishments. Meanwhile, First Officer Jason Reynolds was drowning in guilt. His silence during Amara's humiliation haunted him. After 3 sleepless nights, he called her. I should have spoken up, he admitted. I was afraid. Afraid of what, Jason? Amara asked, her voice carefully neutral. Blackwell has influence over route assignments. I've been trying to get the London route for 2 years. When he suggested we verify your credentials, I thought. His voice trailed off. You thought staying quiet would help your career? Yes, he admitted. I was wrong. Completely wrong. What do you want from me, Jason? Forgiveness? No. I want to make it right. Blackwell and Foster have been systematically undermining minority pilots for years. I've witnessed it but said nothing. I'm willing to go on record now. His testimony proved valuable, revealing how Blackwell created a subtle reward system for pilots who participated in his discriminatory culture. Choice routes, schedule flexibility, and promotion recommendations all flowed to those who understood how things work. As the evidence mounted, so did the pressure. Amara found a note on her car windshield one morning: drop it or regret it. The following day, her home security system reported multiple failed access attempts. They're trying to scare you, Sophia observed during their next meeting. It's working, Amara admitted. But not how they intend. I'm not afraid for myself. I'm afraid of how deep this rot goes. The answer came unexpectedly. While examining promotion patterns, Sophia discovered that Thomas Blackwell was part of an informal group calling themselves the Old School Aviators, a network of 7 senior managers across 3 departments who controlled key aspects of pilot advancement. They communicate through a private messaging system, Sophia explained, showing Amara screenshots a whistleblower had provided. They refer to minority candidates as quota fillers and women pilots as cockpit ornaments. Most disturbing was the discovery that Benjamin Hayes had been systematically shielded from discrimination complaints. His executive assistant, Martin Green, had been reclassifying complaints to ensure they never reached Hayes's desk. They've created a parallel power structure, Amara realized. Hayes thinks everything is running on merit, while this network ensures only their chosen candidates advance. Do you believe workplace discrimination networks often operate with this level of organization? Comment number 1 if you think leadership is usually aware but turns a blind eye, or number 2 if you believe executives are genuinely kept in the dark like CEO Hayes. How far would you go to expose injustice if you were in Amara's position? Like this video if you'd stand your ground despite the threats, and subscribe to see more stories of courage against discrimination. Now, as Amara prepares to face a disciplinary hearing that could end her career, will she back down or fight back? Let's find out what happens next. The Skyline Airlines conference room had been designed to intimidate. 20 feet of polished mahogany tables stretched between massive leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased aircraft taking off and landing, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Amara Johnson straightened her captain's uniform, which she deliberately worn despite being on administrative leave. The disciplinary notice had specified business attire, not uniforms. Another subtle attempt to strip her of authority. "The pilot review board will see you now, Ms. Johnson," the receptionist announced, pointedly omitting her title. Inside, 5 people awaited: Thomas Blackwell, William Foster, Chief Flight Evaluator, Patricia Winters, Human Resources Director, James Sullivan, Legal Counsel, and Captain Robert Thompson, representing the Pilots Association. All white. All regarding her with expressions ranging from open hostility to careful neutrality. "Thank you for joining us, Ms. Johnson," Blackwell began. "This hearing will address the incident on Flight 1342 where you became confrontational with security personnel performing routine verification." "That's Captain Johnson," Amara corrected calmly. "And your characterization of events is factually incorrect, as video evidence confirms." Sullivan, the lawyer, frowned. "We have no video evidence in our files." "That's interesting, considering 3 separate recordings were submitted through proper channels," Amara replied. Blackwell's expression flickered. "Technical issues, perhaps. Regardless, we have sworn statements from security officers Wilson and Ramirez indicating you refuse to comply with standard security protocols. I'd like to see those statements." "They're confidential during this phase of review," Patricia Winters interjected smoothly. "Standard procedure." Captain Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "As the pilot's representative, I should have access to all evidence being presented." After the initial determination, Blackwell countered. "We're still gathering facts." Amara had anticipated this stonewalling. "Then perhaps we should gather the fact that Regional Manager Blackwell personally contacted airport security 17 minutes before they arrived at my aircraft, according to phone records I've subpoenaed." The room fell silent. This was not in their script. "Or the fact," Amara continued, "that officers Wilson and Ramirez had never before been asked to verify a pilot's credentials in this manner, according to their supervisor's statement." "This is becoming adversarial," Sullivan warned. "Captain Johnson, this hearing is meant to be cooperative. Like the cooperation I received while standing in the rain." Amara's voice remained measured, but her eyes locked with Blackwell's. "Or the cooperative approach of spreading rumors about a psychological episode that never occurred?" Foster leaned forward. "Your record shows a pattern of confrontational responses to authority. 3 incidents during your probationary period. All of which involved me correctly challenging unsafe directives that violated FAA regulations," Amara finished. As the investigation concluded, the door opened unexpectedly, and Jason Reynolds entered, still in his first officer's uniform. "This is a closed hearing," Blackwell snapped. "I was summoned as a witness," Jason replied, holding up an email. "By whom?" Winters demanded. "By me," Amara stated. "As is my right under Section 7 of the Pilot Review Procedures." Jason took a seat beside Amara. "I was first officer on Flight 1342. I witnessed everything. Your written statement already indicates Captain Johnson was uncooperative," Foster reminded him. "I'm here to amend that statement," Jason replied. Under duress, I provided an account that misrepresented the facts. Captain Johnson acted with complete professionalism throughout the incident. Blackwell's face darkened. Your loyalty should be to this airline, Reynolds, not to. My loyalty is to the truth, Jason interrupted. And to the values this airline claims to uphold. For 2 years, I've watched qualified pilots like Captain Johnson face barriers that don't exist for pilots who look like me. You're throwing away your career, Blackwell warned. No, sir. You're throwing away yours. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as tension mounted. Blackwell regained his composure, turning to the others. This emotional display doesn't change the facts. Captain Johnson created a security incident that delayed a transatlantic flight. The board needs to consider appropriate disciplinary action, up to and including termination. Amara had prepared for this moment, rehearsing her response for days. She stood, commanding the room's attention. What happened on that tarmac wasn't about security protocols or verification procedures. It was the culmination of a systematic effort to undermine minority pilots at this airline. An effort led by you, Mr. Blackwell, and your network of old-school aviators. She placed a thick folder on the table. This contains documented evidence of discriminatory evaluation practices, biased route assignments, and targeted harassment of minority pilots, particularly women of color. 17 pilots have experienced treatment similar to mine. 5 have already left the airline. This pattern constitutes a violation of federal aviation regulations, labor laws, and Skyline's own stated policies. Sullivan, the lawyer, reached for the folder with barely concealed alarm. These allegations are serious and should be addressed through proper channels, not a disciplinary hearing. I've tried proper channels, Amara replied. Incident reports mysteriously disappear. Complaints get reclassified. Evidence vanishes from files. The system is designed to protect those in power, not ensure justice. The conference room door swung open again. This time, Benjamin Hayes entered, accompanied by Sophia Reyes. I believe this meeting is overdue for executive oversight, Hayes announced, his authoritative presence immediately shifting the room's dynamics. Blackwell stood quickly. Mr. Hayes, this is a standard disciplinary review that doesn't require. Sit down, Thomas. Hayes's voice was quiet but left no room for argument. This hearing is suspended, effective immediately. An independent investigation will be conducted by outside counsel, reporting directly to me. He turned to Amara. Captain Johnson, I offer my personal apology for what you experienced. Your administrative leave is ended, with full back pay. However, I'd like to request you accept temporary reassignment to special projects while the investigation proceeds. Special projects, sir? Amara questioned. Working with MS Reyes to identify and address the issues you've raised throughout our operation, Hayes clarified. Your perspective will be invaluable. The expression on Blackwell's face was worth every moment Amara had spent in the rain. His carefully constructed world was crumbling before his eyes. As the meeting disbanded, Hayes approached Amara privately. Captain, one question. Why didn't you simply file a discrimination lawsuit? You clearly have enough evidence. Amara considered her answer carefully. Because lawsuits end with settlements and non-disclosure agreements. Nothing changes. The next black pilot faces the same barriers. I don't want compensation, Mr. Hayes. I want transformation. The old man studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then I believe we share the same goal. As Amara left the conference room, Blackwell stepped into her path. This isn't over, he murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Amara met his gaze steadily. Actually, I do. A dinosaur who doesn't realize the asteroid has already hit. Thomas Blackwell hadn't built his empire by accepting defeat gracefully. The morning after the suspended hearing, he he convened an emergency meeting of his inner circle at an off-site location. "We have a containment problem," he informed the 6 men gathered in the private dining room of the Arlington Club. "Hayes has brought in outside investigators." William Foster, the flight evaluator, loosened his tie nervously. "What about our communications?" "The OSA group chats." "Being scrubbed as we speak," Blackwell assured him. "But we need to coordinate our response. Reynolds has turned. Johnson has evidence. We need to control the narrative." The next day, Amara discovered what controlling the narrative meant. An aviation industry blog ran a story. Questions arise about captain's psychological fitness after airport incident. Though she wasn't named directly, the details made her identity clear to anyone in the industry. "They're trying to make me radioactive," Amara told Sophia during their morning meeting. "Ensuring no other airline will touch me if this goes badly." "Classic intimidation strategy," Sophia agreed. "But we anticipated this." Indeed they had. While Blackwell was mobilizing his allies, Sophia had secured all relevant personnel files and server backups on secured drives outside Skyline systems. Evidence couldn't disappear if it was already preserved. The counterattack extended beyond Amara. Zoe Parker found herself reassigned from premium international routes to the punishing regional shuttle service, 6 short flights daily with minimal layover time, a schedule typically reserved for disciplinary cases. "They know I provided evidence," she told Amara during a hurried phone call between flights. "Blackwell's deputy cornered me in the crew lounge and said, 'Hope you enjoy Buffalo in February.'" Jason Reynolds faced even harsher retaliation. Overnight, fellow pilots stopped speaking to him. His locker was vandalized with the word "traitor" spray-painted across it. Flight assignments where he'd been requested as first officer were mysteriously changed. "It's like I've been marked," he confided to Amara. 20 years of friendships, gone in an instant. "Because you chose integrity over complicity," Amara replied. "That's the true measure of character, Jason." The independent investigator, a former FAA official named Lawrence Washington, encountered his own obstacles. Key witnesses suddenly became unavailable for interviews. Meeting rooms reserved for confidential sessions were mysteriously double-booked. Document requests were met with delays and bureaucratic hurdles. "Someone's interfering with my investigation," Washington informed Hayes during their weekly update. "I can't access basic flight records without multiple authorizations." Hayes's response was immediate. "You'll have my executive authorization code. Use it whenever you encounter resistance." What none of them anticipated was Blackwell's next move. During an emergency board meeting called to address operational concerns, he presented medical documentation questioning Hayes's cognitive capacity. "It pains me to bring this forward," Blackwell said with practiced sincerity to the stunned board members. "But Mr. Hayes has been showing signs of impaired judgment. His personal physician has expressed concerns about early dementia symptoms." The documentation, later proven to be falsified, was convincing enough to raise serious concerns. The board, though reluctant, placed Hayes on a 30-day medical leave pending comprehensive evaluation, with Blackwell named as interim operational director. Within hours of assuming temporary leadership, Blackwell began dismantling the investigation. Lawrence Washington was informed his services were no longer required. Sofia Reyes was sent to oversee Skyline's troubled Latin American division, effectively exiling her to their smallest operation thousands of miles away. When Amara arrived at her temporary office the next morning, she found the locks changed and a security guard posted outside. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the guard said, genuinely apologetic. "Orders from the interim director. Your building access has been revoked pending security review." That night, the death threats began. The first came as a text from an unknown number: "Pilots who can't fly sometimes fall from high places." The second was a voicemail of cockpit warning sounds, the altitude alert, stall warning, and finally, the crash indicator. Sophia called from Mexico City, her voice tense. "Amara, they're escalating. You need to consider your safety. If I back down now, they win, Amara replied, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. This isn't about winning or losing anymore. It's about living to fight another day. Hayes will be back in 2 weeks once the medical evaluation clears him. We can regroup then. Amara stared out her apartment window at the planes taking off from the distant airport. Flying had been her dream since childhood. Now it was being used to threaten her. Maybe you're right, she conceded. Maybe a strategic retreat makes sense. The next morning, she drafted her resignation letter. As her finger hovered over the send button, her phone rang. It was Benjamin Hayes, calling from his home. "Don't you dare quit, Captain Johnson," he said without preamble. "Mr. Hayes? How did you? Sophia told me you were considering resignation." "That's exactly what they want. Sir, with respect, they've won this round. You're sidelined. Sophia's exiled. The investigation is shut down. And I'm receiving threats." Hayes's voice hardened. "My father built ships during World War II. He told me the most important lesson in any battle, when you're taking flak, it means you're over the target. What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you to hold position. The medical evaluation is complete, I'm fit as a fiddle. The board chairman is reviewing the falsified documents as we speak. And I've been using my unexpected vacation to make some long overdue calls to old friends at the FAA and Department of Transportation." Amara felt the first glimmer of hope in days. "You have a plan." "No, Captain. We have a plan. And it requires you to do something very difficult." "What's that?" "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Let Blackwell believe he's won. Let him grow comfortable and careless. The biggest mistakes happen when people think they're untouchable." Amara deleted her draft resignation. "How long?" 3 days. "Can you hold out that long?" She thought of her grandfather, who'd been one of the Tuskegee Airmen. He'd faced discrimination far worse than anything she'd encountered, yet never surrendered his dignity or his determination. "I can hold out as long as necessary, sir." "Good. And Amara? When this is over, we need to talk about the future of Skyline. The real future." While publicly appearing defeated, Amara began constructing the most important strategy of her career. She reached out to Jordan Williams, a former Air Force comrade who had become an investigative journalist specializing in transportation issues. "I need to understand something," she told Jordan during their secure call. "If an airline has systematic discrimination issues, who has regulatory oversight?" "Multiple agencies," Jordan replied. "The FAA for operational safety concerns, the EEOC for workplace discrimination, the DOT for compliance with carrier regulations." "Why?" "Just keeping my options open." Jordan wasn't fooled. "Amara, if you're building a case, you need to consider the nuclear option." "Which is?" "Whistleblower protection under the Air 21 Act. It supersedes any non-disclosure agreements and provides federal protection if you can demonstrate safety was compromised by discriminatory practices." This was the leverage Amara needed, a way to ensure the evidence couldn't be buried again. While Blackwell believed she had retreated, she was actually building a comprehensive dossier linking discriminatory practices to specific safety concerns. Meanwhile, Sophia worked from Mexico City to secure digital backups of all evidence. Using her executive override codes before they could be deactivated, she created secure copies of emails, personnel files, and evaluation records that demonstrated the pattern of discrimination. "If they try to wipe the servers, we still have everything," she assured Amara during their encrypted video call. "I've also identified financial irregularities in Blackwell's department." "What kind of irregularities?" "Consultant payments to shell companies that trace back to his brother-in-law. Padded travel expenses. And most interestingly, bonuses paid to specific managers whenever a minority pilot resigned." They were literally being rewarded for driving us out, Amara realized. Exactly. And financial misconduct is sometimes easier to prove than discrimination. On the front lines, Zoe Parker organized a silent protest among flight attendants. Though they couldn't publicly challenge management, they adopted subtle signals of solidarity, wearing black armbands during flights, citing uniform enhancement if questioned. The gesture spread to ground crews and maintenance staff who had witnessed similar discrimination. Jason Reynolds made perhaps the most dangerous move, connecting Amara with senior members of the Pilots Association who had grown concerned about Blackwell's increasing power. "The old guard is nervous," Jason reported after a clandestine meeting. "Blackwell's vendettas are affecting operational efficiency. Last month's safety incidents are up 17% compared to last year." That's the connection we need, Amara realized. Discrimination isn't just a moral failing, it's creating measurable safety risks. By the third day of Hayes' countdown, Amara had compiled a comprehensive reform plan for airline hiring and promotion. The document addressed every aspect of pilot advancement, from initial screening to captain certification, with specific measures to eliminate bias at each stage. That evening, Hayes called again. "It's time. Meet me at my home tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Come prepared for a full day." When Amara arrived at Hayes' Georgian mansion in Potomac, she found not just Hayes and Sophia waiting, but also 3 Skyline board members and the company's outside counsel. "Captain Johnson," Hayes greeted her formally. "Thank you for joining us. I believe you know why we're here." "The future of Skyline," she replied, echoing his words from their last conversation. "Precisely." Hayes gestured toward the assembled group. "I've spent 50 years building this airline. I've made mistakes, including being too removed from day-to-day operations. That ends today." For the next 4 hours, Amara and Sophia presented their evidence and recommendations. The board members, initially skeptical, grew increasingly disturbed as the pattern of discrimination became undeniable. "This isn't just a legal liability," the outside counsel emphasized. "It's an existential threat to the company's reputation and operations." Hayes waited until all questions had been addressed before speaking again. "I founded Skyline with one principle above all others: excellence without exception. Somewhere along the way, excellence became confused with exclusion. That changes now." He turned to Amara. "Captain Johnson, I'm not just returning to work tomorrow. I'm announcing my retirement, effective in 30 days. The room fell silent. Hayes had been the face and spirit of Skyline for half a century. "The board has already approved a leadership reorganization," he continued. "But there's one position I've reserved the right to fill personally." He slid a folder across the table to Amara. "I need someone who understands both the operational and cultural challenges we face." Amara opened the folder and froze. Inside was an offer letter for Chief Operations Officer of Skyline Airlines. "Sir, I'm a pilot, not an executive," she protested. "You're a leader," Hayes corrected. "One who's demonstrated extraordinary judgment under the most trying circumstances. Skyline doesn't need another businessman in the C-suite. It needs someone who understands what excellence truly means." The realization of what Hayes was proposing hit Amara like a physical force. She wouldn't just be returning to the cockpit, she would be responsible for overseeing the entire operational structure of the airline. "This is a lot to process," she admitted. "Take 24 hours, Hayes suggested. "But know this, you've already done the hardest part of the job by identifying what needs to change. Now you have the opportunity to implement those changes with full authority." As the meeting concluded, Sophia pulled Amara aside. "You know what this means, right? Your first official act would be addressing the leadership that enabled discrimination," Amara finished, the implications becoming clear. "Including Blackwell." "Poetic justice," Sophia smiled. The woman he tried to destroy would become his boss, with termination authority. That night, alone in her apartment, Amara called her parents. Her father, a retired postal worker who had faced his own battles with workplace discrimination, listened quietly as she explained the situation. "Dad, what would you do? I became a pilot to fly, not to sit in an office." After a thoughtful pause, he responded, "Remember when you were 10, and you said you wanted to touch the sky? I told you then that some people would say you couldn't, because of your color or because you're a woman. What matters isn't just that you proved them wrong, it's how many others will fly because you opened the door." His words crystallized her decision. The next morning, she called Hayes. "I accept the position, sir. On one condition." "Name it." "I get to be the one who tells Blackwell." The announcement of Benjamin Hayes's retirement sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. After 50 years at the helm of Skyline, his departure marked the end of an era. Financial analysts speculated about succession plans, with Thomas Blackwell widely considered the frontrunner despite his controversial management style. Blackwell certainly thought so. He spent the week after the announcement redecorating the executive office he expected to inherit, ordering new furniture and scheduling meetings with key board members to outline his vision for Skyline's future. The special board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Monday, deliberately chosen to coincide with the exact time Amara had been escorted from her aircraft 3 months earlier. The symmetry wasn't lost on those who understood what was about to happen. In the boardroom, anticipation hung heavy in the air. 14 people sat around the massive table, 9 board members, Benjamin Hayes, the corporate secretary, Sophia Reyes, the company's general counsel, and Thomas Blackwell, who had positioned himself at the right hand of the chairman, already playing the role of successor. Conspicuously absent was Amara Johnson, a fact Blackwell noted with satisfaction. Clearly, she had finally accepted defeat and moved on. Hayes called the meeting to order precisely at 9 a.m. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for convening on short notice. As you know, my retirement necessitates key leadership decisions that will shape Skyline's future. Before we address those, however, Ms. Reyes has an important presentation regarding operational concerns." Blackwell shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't on the agenda he'd been given. Sophia stood, activating the room's display screens. "Board members, I'm here to present findings from a comprehensive review of Skyline's pilot evaluation and advancement practices over the past 5 years." For the next 30 minutes, she methodically laid out the evidence of systematic discrimination. Statistical analyses showed undeniable patterns. Testimony from pilots and staff revealed consistent experiences. Financial audits demonstrated the cost to the airline in lost talent and training investments. The board's initial skepticism gave way to concern, then alarm. Several members began taking copious notes, while others asked increasingly pointed questions. Ms. Reyes, the chairwoman, finally interjected, "These findings are deeply troubling. What you're describing isn't just unethical, it potentially violates federal regulations and exposes Skyline to significant liability. That's precisely why we've already developed a comprehensive remediation plan," Sophia replied. "With your approval, we're prepared to implement immediate changes to address these issues." Blackwell could remain silent no longer. "This is preposterous. These so-called patterns can be explained by performance differences, not discrimination. We maintain the highest standards for our pilots, standards some candidates simply fail to meet." "Interesting perspective, Mr. Blackwell," came a voice from the doorway. "Perhaps you'd care to explain these standards to the Department of Transportation investigators I met with last week?" All heads turned to see Amara Johnson entering the boardroom, not in her pilot's uniform but in an impeccable executive suit. The contrast with her previous treatment, rain-soaked and humiliated on the tarmac, couldn't have been more striking. "Captain Johnson is here at my invitation," Hayes explained as Amara took a seat directly opposite Blackwell. "Her insights have been invaluable in understanding the scope of our challenges." With respect, Blackwell sputtered, struggling to maintain composure, "Operational reviews should be conducted by qualified executives, not line pilots with obvious personal grievances. I couldn't agree more about qualifications, Hayes replied. Which brings us to the main purpose of today's meeting. He nodded to the corporate secretary, who distributed sealed envelopes to each board member. Before you is my formal recommendation for Skyline's next Chief Operations Officer. This appointment is subject to board approval, but falls within my authority as outlined in our corporate charter. The board members opened their envelopes simultaneously. Blackwell, who hadn't received one, watched their expressions with growing alarm. Captain Amara Johnson, the chairwoman read aloud, breaking the stunned silence. Benjamin, are you certain about this recommendation? I've never been more certain of any decision in my 50 years with this airline, Hayes replied firmly. Captain Johnson brings exceptional operational experience, demonstrated leadership under pressure, and a clear vision for Skyline's future. Her military background and commercial aviation expertise give her unique insight into our most critical challenges. This is outrageous. Blackwell exploded. She's been with the airline less than 5 years. She has zero executive experience. This is nothing but tokenism and reverse discrimination. That's an interesting choice of words, Mr. Blackwell, Amara commented calmly. Especially given the evidence Ms. Reyes just presented about your own discriminatory practices. The chairwoman studied Amara thoughtfully. Captain Johnson, while your qualifications as a pilot are impressive, leading an operation of Skyline's complexity requires different skills. How do you address this concern? Amara had anticipated this question. Madam Chairwoman, I commanded multi-aircraft operations in active combat zones, coordinating with international forces under life-or-death pressure. I've managed flight safety for a squadron of 26 aircraft and 70 personnel. My advanced degrees in aeronautical engineering and business administration provide technical and management foundations. But most importantly, I understand what excellence truly means, not conformity to a predetermined image, but pursuing the highest standards regardless of who meets them. Her response silenced the room. Even those who had doubts could not question her poise and clarity of thought. The board voted 7-2 to approve Hayes' recommendation. Amara Johnson would become Skyline's new Chief Operations Officer, effective immediately. As the meeting adjourned, Blackwell approached Amara, his face contorted with barely contained rage. You think you've won, he hissed under his breath. But you have no idea how this business really works. The old guard won't accept you. They'll undermine you at every turn. You'll be out within 6 months. Amara smiled. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Blackwell. But I should mention that my first official act as COO will be reviewing the management structure of our regional operations. She checked her watch deliberately. In fact, I've scheduled that review for tomorrow morning. Your calendar has already been updated. As Blackwell stalked away, Sophia joined Amara. How does it feel? Surreal, Amara admitted. 3 months ago, I was standing in the rain while he watched from inside. Now you're his boss, Sophia finished. With the authority to ensure he never humiliates another pilot. It's not about revenge, Amara said, though the satisfaction was undeniable. It's about transformation. Speaking of transformation, Sophia noted, there's a flight crew waiting to hear from you. The same crew from that day. Amara nodded. Perfect. It's time to come full circle. The morning after her appointment, Amara Johnson stood in her new office, adjusting to the strange reality of her situation. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Reagan National's runways, the same runways she'd expected to navigate from a cockpit, not an executive suite. Ms. Reyes is here for your 8 a.m., her new assistant announced through the intercom. Send her in, please. And Karen? It's Amara. At least when it's just us. Sophia entered carrying 2 coffee cups and a thick folder. Congratulations, Madam COO. I brought your favorite, black with 2 sugars. Thanks. Still feels like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's office. Amara gestured around the spacious room with its expensive furnishings. "It's your office now," Sophia reminded her. "And we have work to do." She opened the folder, revealing personnel files for Blackwell and his inner circle. The bold school aviators are all here. 7 senior managers who've been systematically undermining minority advancement. Amara reviewed the files carefully. "Have termination packages been prepared?" "For all 7, with full documentation of cause. Legal has verified we're on solid ground." Sophia hesitated. "Are you sure about this approach? It's unprecedented to remove this many managers simultaneously." "Cancer requires aggressive treatment," Amara replied. "Removing just Blackwell would leave the system intact. We need comprehensive change." Their discussion was interrupted by a call from Benjamin Hayes. "Amara, have you made your decision about this morning's flight?" She had been struggling with this question since her appointment. Skyline Flight 1342 to London, the same route she'd been prevented from captaining, was scheduled for 11 a.m. Hayes had offered to delay the flight if she wanted to captain it personally, a symbolic reclaiming of what had been denied her. "I have, sir. I won't be flying today." "May I ask why?" It would be a powerful statement. "Because I'm not doing this for symbolic victories. I'm doing it for structural change." She glanced at the personnel files on her desk. "And I have more important work to do on the ground." Hayes chuckled. "I knew I made the right choice. Good luck today. Make it count." At 9:30 a.m., Amara and Sophia arrived at the airport's administrative offices. They had deliberately chosen the same conference room where Amara's disciplinary hearing had taken place. Now, Thomas Blackwell and his 6 closest allies waited inside, having been summoned for an emergency operations review. Blackwell's smirk vanished when Amara entered in her new executive attire, followed by 2 security officers and a representative from Human Resources. "Good morning, gentlemen," Amara began without preamble. "This meeting will be brief. Effective immediately, all of you are terminated from employment with Skyline Airlines." The stunned silence lasted only seconds before eruptions of protest. "You can't do this. This is outrageous. I'll sue this company into oblivion." Amara raised her hand, silencing them with the same authority she'd once used on military tarmacs. "Each of you is receiving a termination package with detailed documentation of the causes for dismissal. These include discriminatory practices, violation of federal aviation regulations, creation of a hostile work environment, and in several cases, financial improprieties." She nodded to the HR representative, who distributed thick envelopes to each man. "You have 30 minutes to clean out your personal belongings under security escort. Your access credentials have already been deactivated. Company devices and files are to remain on premises." Blackwell, his face flushed with rage, stepped toward Amara. "You think you've won? I built relationships in this industry for 30 years. No one will work with you. You'll destroy this airline. Actually, Mr. Blackwell, you nearly destroyed this airline." Amara's voice remained calm. "Your discriminatory practices cost us talented pilots. Your retaliatory management style created operational inefficiencies. Your focus on maintaining power rather than promoting excellence undermined our safety culture. So no, I haven't won, but Skyline has certainly stopped losing." As security escorted the men out, Sophia turned to Amara. "That was impressive. Where to next?" "Gate 23, Amara replied. "I have unfinished business with a flight crew." At the gate where her humiliation had begun, Amara found the assembled crew of Flight 1342, the same flight attendants, ground staff, and cockpit crew who had witnessed her removal 3 months earlier. Among them stood Jason Reynolds, reinstated as first officer, and Zoe Parker, returned from her punitive regional assignment. Many looked nervous, uncertain why the new COO had summoned them personally. Some had participated in her mistreatment through action or inaction, a fact reflected in their averted gazes. 3 months ago, I stood outside this aircraft in the rain, Amara began, her voice carrying to every corner of the gate area. Today, I return not seeking revenge, but responsibility. She surveyed the assembled crew. Some of you spoke up that day. Some stayed silent. Some actively participated in discrimination. I'm not here to punish or reward based on past actions. I'm here to establish what Skyline will be going forward. From her briefcase, she withdrew a document and held it up. This is Skyline's new accountability policy. It establishes clear protocols for reporting discrimination, protections for whistleblowers, and consequences for those who abuse authority. Every employee, from baggage handlers to executives, will be held to the same standard of professional respect. She handed the document to the lead flight attendant. Effective immediately, this policy applies throughout Skyline's operations. Today's flight will be the first under these new guidelines. Turning to Jason Reynolds, she continued. First Officer Reynolds will be acting as captain for today's flight. His courage in eventually speaking truth, despite personal cost, exemplifies the integrity we need. Jason's eyes widened in surprise. Thank you, Madam COO. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Amara replied. Then, addressing the entire crew, let this flight symbolize Skyline's new direction, where excellence is our only criterion, opportunity is equally available, and accountability applies to everyone. As the crew prepared to board, Zoe approached Amara privately. What happens now? With you as COO instead of in the cockpit? Amara smiled. Phase 2 begins. We've removed the obstacles. Now we build the pathways, mentorship programs, recruitment initiatives, transparent evaluation systems. The real work isn't punishing discrimination, it's creating a culture where it can't take root. Will you ever fly again? Zoe asked. Absolutely. I've reserved captain privileges for special routes. This office won't keep me grounded forever. As passengers began boarding, Amara noticed a young black girl, perhaps 10 years old, staring at her with undisguised awe. Are you a pilot? The girl asked, eyeing Amara's executive attire with confusion. I am, Amara confirmed. And also Chief Operations Officer for the entire airline. The girl's eyes widened. So you're the boss of everybody? Of the operations, yes. I want to be a pilot too, the girl declared. My teacher said it's hard for people like us, but my mom says I can do anything. Your mom is right, Amara replied, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes. And it's going to be a little easier by the time you're ready to fly. As the child boarded with her mother, Amara felt the weight of her new responsibility with crystal clarity. Her greatest victory wasn't becoming COO or firing Blackwell. It was ensuring that this girl would never stand in the rain, uniform dripping, questioning her worth and belonging. 6 months later, Skyline announced record-breaking operational efficiency metrics and the most diverse pilot training class in its history. Applications from minority candidates had increased by 70%. The Skyline Standard, Amara's comprehensive accountability framework, was being adopted by other airlines facing similar challenges. And on the anniversary of that rainy day at Gate 23, Captain Amara Johnson, taking a rare day away from her executive duties, personally piloted Skyline's flagship London route, completing the journey that discrimination had once interrupted, proving that excellence cannot be grounded by bigotry. Amara Johnson's journey from humiliated pilot to transformative leader teaches us that true change requires both courage and strategy. When facing discrimination, emotional reactions alone rarely create lasting impact. Instead, systematic documentation, strategic alliances, and patience become powerful weapons against injustice. The story demonstrates how discrimination thrives in shadows. Exposed to light, it cannot survive. Hayes believed in meritocracy but remained blind to discrimination until confronted with irrefutable evidence. This highlights how even well-intentioned leaders can perpetuate broken systems through ignorance. Perhaps most importantly, Amara understood that personal vindication means little without structural transformation. Rather than settling for symbolic victories or financial compensation, she positioned herself to create pathways for others. Her greatest achievement wasn't punishing those who wronged her, but ensuring future pilots would never face the same barriers. This reflects the truth about fighting discrimination. It's not about individual incidents but dismantling systems that enable them. The most powerful response to prejudice isn't revenge, but reform that creates equity for generations to come. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced, and how did you respond? Would you have the courage to stand in the rain like Amara, documenting the injustice rather than simply walking away? Comment below with your own stories of confronting bias. If this tale of transformation inspired you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful racism stories, and share with someone who needs this message of hope and accountability. Thank you for joining this important conversation, and remember, real change happens when we refuse to accept discrimination as inevitable.